Yeah. How about Branagh? Let's see, you saw the Branagh version? Have you seen that scene yet?
I haven't finished the whole thing yet. So.
Have you seen that scene, though?
Yes.
Her mad scene?
Okay.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, no, not her
No,
mad
no, no,
scene.
no, I'm not talking about Ophelia's mad scene. I'm talking about the scene in which Ophelia is being used to try to trap Hamlet. Do you remember how that's handled in Branagh's version?
As far as whether or not he knows
Yeah.
that they're there?
And how does he act towards her?
It's all those two-way mirrored doors.
Right.
And he
Right.
hears something,
Right.
and he goes, and he's dragging her around.
Right.
He's holding onto her and kind of throwing her down. At the same time, he's opening all those doors, and he shoves her up against
Right.
the one door where they're at, and they turn it around, and you can see the view from their
Okay.
point, from their view, where she's smashed up against the glass, and then they run and escape before he gets into the door. So.
And what happens at the very end of that scene? How does he behave toward her? Is it still violent, angry, or does he become
No,
tender?
she's sitting down like in the door.
Okay, but does he become tender towards her?
I think, isn't the last thing he says to her, "Get thee to the nunnery" or something?
Yeah, but
he's quiet. He's
yeah,
not.
go ahead. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's much more tender towards her than, say, Olivier is in his version. Now, Mel Gibson, we haven't really talked about that version very much. That's a very interesting version of Hamlet, by the way. I talked a little bit about Zeffirelli in an earlier class when I was talking about directors. But Mel Gibson is an interesting casting choice because clearly what Zeffirelli is trying to do is to distance himself from that romantic version of Hamlet that you find in Olivier, that he is too sensitive a soul. That's what Goethe said, the great German poet said back in the 18th century about Hamlet. He is too sensitive, too fine a soul, a sensibility for the situation in which he finds himself. And that is why he is brought to his tragedy in the end. Well, that pretty much is the way in which Olivier plays the character of Hamlet as the romantic Hamlet, the romantic hero. So, and again, I don't mean romantic in the sense of hug, hug, kiss, kiss. I'm talking about romantic in the sense of romanticism. Now, why choose Mel Gibson? Because Mel Gibson had a reputation, right, in his earlier films. He was in all those adventure action films. So you pick somebody like that and put him in Hamlet as Hamlet, and part of what you were saying to the audience is, this is a very different kind of Hamlet. He is tough. He is a man of action, or certainly somebody who's capable of action. And we see Mel Gibson a number of times in a number of scenes being very much a man of action. Okay? Notice that that too is an interpretation of the play. Again and again and again, we keep coming back to the fact that what we've got here is we've got words on a page. We've got script for a play, but we don't have a play. We only have a play when that is performed, when it's actually put in production. Now, if you're skillful enough at it and thoughtful enough, you can, in effect, produce it in your own head. Well, this is what I would do. This is how I would stage it. Okay, but normally what we mean by a production is something which is actually produced on stage, or in the cases that we've been talking about on film. Okay, so let's go back then to the scene, the "Get thee to a nunnery, go" scene. And so see what is at stake here? The question of whether or not Hamlet knows that he's being spied on and that this is an effort to trap him is a way of attempting to resolve the problem of his harshness, even meanness, even violence towards her. Okay? So that if you have him knowing that he's being spied on, it makes it easier for us to accept Hamlet being as hard on her as he is. So that in the Branagh version, you're right, he actually hears a door close. And when he hears that door close, he knows, aha, you see, there's somebody else here. We are not alone. I'm being set up. Okay? In the Olivier version, he actually sees them there, going back there. Okay, so that's one kind of scene that we would want to talk about, because it clearly has to do with issues about Hamlet, his relationship not only with Ophelia, but the question of madness and so forth. Now let's consider another scene. What about the scene with his mother, the so-called closet scene? And you will recall what I said earlier about the word closet. At this time, it didn't mean what we mean by our closets in our homes, a small enclosure where we hang our clothes. It meant an enclosed space within a house, or in this case, apparently a castle. But it's really her bedroom. So, what happens in that scene? What happens in the so-called closet scene? Well, you haven't gotten there yet, huh? Well, it comes right after the chapel scene. And remember, he has hesitated to kill Claudius because Claudius seemed to be asking for God's forgiveness for his sins. After Hamlet leaves, having not killed Claudius, Claudius goes on to say, oh, this is not working. My prayers are not working. He's not really sincere. I mean, what would he have to do if he were truly, truly, truly sorry for his sins and truly wanted God's forgiveness? He'd have to confess what he's done, and he would have to give up being king. The very least is he'd have to go into exile. Okay? Maybe he would suffer execution. But at the very least, he'd have to go into exile. So he's not willing to do any of those things, is he? He's not willing to give up his position, his power, his wife. And so then Hamlet goes to Gertrude's bedroom. And who's in the bedroom with her? Polonius is in the bedroom. And Polonius says he's going to hide now behind a tapestry, wall hanging, right? Does Hamlet know who's behind there? I mean, he's obviously going to find out that somebody's behind there. Does Hamlet know who is behind there? Because what happens is that Hamlet starts getting really worked up in the scene with his mother. And again, physically violent, not verbally violent, certainly, but physically violent, not in the sense that he's hitting her or anything like that, but he's shaking her. I mean, he's physically shaking her, okay, in various versions of this. And he's yelling at her, that look at what you have done. You see, you have participated in this incestuous marriage. How could you do this? Look at this picture of my father, your former husband. How could you possibly, after having been married to him, now have married this person, this Claudius? And he even wants to go on, of course, and begin to suggest things about the killing. Well, at some point where he's really, really getting carried away, she is shouting. He's shouting, and she shouts. And here's Polonius behind the tapestry. And he starts shouting, right? And what does Hamlet do? Yeah, he stabs him through the tapestry with his sword, kills him. And then when he drags his body out, what does he say?
Idiot.
Well, yeah, idiot, yeah, right. But what does he say?
Doesn't he ask if it's the king?
Yeah, is it the king? Is it the king? That's the first thing. And then when he drags him out, what does he say to now the dead body of Polonius? Thou rash, intruding fool, I took thee for thy better. Now, who's the better in the court? The king, exactly. Because Polonius's position is what? In the court. He's a kind of chancellor